Chapter 4. The Responsibility of Coexistence. Foundations of Interconnected Ethics. In a living cosmos, every organism, from the mightiest whale to the humblest soil bacterium, plays a unique role in maintaining the balance of ecosystems. Interconnected ethics arises from this reality, demanding that we view moral responsibility not as a domain exclusive to human relations, but as an expansive web of obligations that encompasses all life. No longer can we treat nature as an external resource. Instead, we recognize it as a partner in a shared journey towards flourishing. At the heart of this ethic lies a shift from dominion to kinship. Ancient cultures spoke of humans as the crown of creation, but a relational perspective reframes us as one strand among many in the tapestry of life. This perspective change requires both intellectual and emotional work. We learn the names and stories of local species, we spend time in wild spaces to attune our senses to non-human rhythms, and we reflect on the ways our urban lifestyles ripple through global biomes. Grounded in indigenous and land-based philosophies, interconnected ethics affirms that reciprocity is more than symbolic. It is the guiding principle for action. For every harvest, we give back through regenerative planting. For every watershed we draw upon, we restore wetlands that filter and recharge. By codifying these reciprocity practices into community norms and policy frameworks, we institutionalize respect for life's myriad forms. In this way, interconnected ethics becomes both a compass, pointing us toward choices that honor the integrity of living systems, and a toolkit, supplying concrete methods for translating compassion into conservation, stewardship, and sustainable innovation. Respecting the web of life in practice. Respect for biodiversity extends beyond protected reserves and charismatic megafauna. It permeates everyday decisions. Choosing shade-grown coffee supports migratory songbirds. Installing native plant gardens fosters pollinator networks. Adopting plant-based meals reduces pressure on monoculture agriculture. Each small act, when multiplied across millions of citizens, shifts the ecological balance in favor of renewal rather than degradation. Organizations play a pivotal role in scaling respect. Corporations can integrate biodiversity audits into supply chain management, identifying critical habitats at risk, and funding community-led restoration initiatives. Municipalities might adopt biophilic urbanism, weaving green corridors through cityscapes that double as recreation areas and wildlife sanctuaries. Even localized efforts, such as dark sky ordinances that limit nighttime lighting, demonstrate respect for nocturnal species, exemplifying how nuanced policies can collectively uphold the web of life. Critically, respecting life's interconnectedness means anticipating unintended consequences. When introducing a new crop variety for food security, agronomists must assess potential invasiveness, soil nutrient impacts, and gene flow to wild relatives. Likewise, energy planners evaluating hydropower must weigh greenhouse gas benefits against riverine ecosystem disruptions. This precautionary stance, rooted in respect, ensures that interventions intended to help do not inadvertently harm the broader community of beings. Ultimately, respect for the web of life demands humility, acknowledging that our knowledge is incomplete and that complex systems often react in unanticipated ways. By embedding continuous monitoring and adaptive management into every initiative, we demonstrate reverence for life's dynamism and a willingness to course correct in service of the whole. Empathy beyond the human. Empathy's traditional scope, feeling with other humans, must expand to encompass the suffering and joy of all sentient beings. Recent ecological research reveals that many non-human animals experience complex emotions: elephants grieving their dead, octopuses exploring their environments with curiosity, and ravens playing games. Recognizing these capacities compels us to extend moral consideration and to craft legal protections that reflect the inner lives of other creatures. Empathic extension begins with concerted effort to learn species-specific communication cues, body postures, vocalizations, chemical signals, and to interpret them without anthropocentric distortion. Wildlife biologists use non-invasive monitoring and community science to document behavior in natural contexts, ensuring that our understanding of animal emotional worlds is grounded in evidence rather than projection. In practical terms, empathy manifests in habitat design that accommodates natural behaviors, providing enrichment structures in zoos, preserving oceanic migration corridors, and safeguarding breeding grounds. It also informs conflict mitigation. Farmers co-develop strategies to deter crop-raiding elephants without harm. Conservationists partner with local communities to protect wolves through non-lethal deterrence, and policymakers subsidize wildlife-friendly fencing that balances human safety with animal passage. Empathy beyond the human thus transforms our relationship with other species from one of exploitation or mere tolerance to genuine care. It inspires policy, design, and everyday choices that honor the emotional lives of all sentient beings, cementing coexistence rooted in compassion and respect. Reciprocal accountability, listening to nature's feedback. Ethical coexistence hinges on reciprocal accountability, the principle that nature, like any relationship partner, responds to our actions. Ecosystem collapse, species extinctions, and climate extremes are manifestations of ecological feedback, signaling that vital thresholds have been crossed. Attunement to these signals requires robust environmental monitoring, early warning systems, and open channels for scientific findings to inform policy swiftly. Adaptive governance structures exemplify reciprocal accountability. Watershed councils comprising indigenous leaders, local farmers, hydrologists, and recreationists convene to manage river flows, adjusting dam releases in response to fish migration patterns and sediment transport data. Similarly, dynamic fisheries management uses real-time stock assessments and community observations to set catch limits that prevent overharvest. Beyond formal institutions, reciprocal accountability can emerge through participatory mapping and citizen observatories. Community members document seasonal changes, flowering times, bird arrival dates, flood events, creating collective data sets that reveal ecosystem trends. When these grassroots insights feed into regional planning, they reinforce the notion that those living closest to the land bear both the knowledge and the responsibility to safeguard it. Through these feedback loops, coexistence becomes an ongoing conversation. We act, nature responds, and we learn and adapt. This iterative process ensures accountability not only to one another, but to the living world whose well-being underpins our own. To designing ethical coexistence systems. To embed ethics of coexistence at scale, we must engineer multi-layered systems, legal, economic, technological, and infrastructural, that codify respect for all life. Rights of nature legislation, enacted in rivers and forests worldwide, grants ecosystems legal standing, empowering guardians to litigate on their behalf. Coupled with community stewardship models, this legal innovation rebalances power in favor of ecological integrity. Economic systems can be redesigned to internalize environmental costs. True cost accounting attaches financial value to ecosystem services, pollination, water purification, carbon sequestration, translating them into market signals that discourage destructive practices and reward regenerative ones. Green bonds, blue carbon credits, and biodiversity offsets, when rigorously regulated, channel investment into projects that restore rather than degrade natural capital. Technological solutions must align with ethical coexistence. Building materials drawn from circular bioeconomies, fungal mycelium composites, bamboo-based polymers, reduce waste and pollution. Smart irrigation powered by soil moisture sensors economizes water use while maintaining wetland habitats. Urban design integrates wildlife passages over highways and bird-safe glass to prevent migratory collisions. Each innovation, guided by coexistence ethics, marries human advancement with planetary health. Infrastructure planning, from transportation to energy grids, embraces nature-based solutions. Mangrove restoration buffers storm surges more cost-effectively than concrete seawalls. Urban green roofs mitigate heat islands. Permeable pavements recharge aquifers. By imitating and integrating living systems, we create resilient landscapes that sustain both human communities and the broader biosphere. Ultimately, designing ethical coexistence systems demands cross-sector collaboration. Governments, businesses, civil society, and indigenous custodians co-creating governance architectures that reflect the complexity of life's interdependence. In doing so, we transform coexistence from lofty aspiration into practical reality, forging pathways for humanity to flourish in harmony with all beings. Harmony through cultural wisdom. Human cultures across the globe have, for millennia, woven practices and rituals that honor the delicate balance of ecosystems. These traditions, ranging from fire stick farming by Australian Aboriginal communities to the intricate rice terracing systems of Southeast Asia, embody an ethic of harmony born from sustained, place-based observation. They remind us that coherence with nature is not a theoretical ideal, but a lived, dynamic practice. Revitalizing and integrating these ancestral wisdom systems demands genuine partnership. In Canada's boreal forests, co-management agreements between Indigenous nations and government agencies blend traditional fire stewardship calendars, timed to seasonal cues, with advanced fire behavior modeling. This fusion has significantly reduced catastrophic wildfire frequency, protected wildlife habitat, and maintained forest health. Likewise, Andean communities' seed-saving cooperatives preserve hundreds of potato land races adapted to microclimates along altitudinal gradients, ensuring food security under shifting climatic conditions. Such initiatives illustrate that cultural wisdom is not static folklore, but an adaptive framework. It thrives on iterative learning. Elders mentor youth in observation of ecological indicators, flowering times, animal migrations, while younger generations contribute remote sensing data and digital archiving techniques. By codifying these collaborative protocols into regional conservation policies and educational curricula, we honor the imperative of harmony and cultivate creative syntheses between ancient traditions and modern science. Moreover, embedding cultural rituals, harvest festivals that reinvigorate communal bonds, river cleansing ceremonies that reaffirm reciprocal duty, into contemporary environmental governance fosters a sense of shared stewardship. These ceremonies provide recurring occasions for collective reflection, allowing communities to realign their activities with ecological cycles, to celebrate resilience, and to mourn losses, thus reinforcing the emotional and social foundations of coexistence. There's the imperative of empathetic innovation. Innovation divorced from empathy risks technical brilliance that tramples social and ecological values. Empathetic innovation begins with deep listening, engaging directly with frontline communities, understanding the daily challenges of smallholder farmers, coastal fishers, or urban slum residents who often bear the brunt of environmental degradation. When innovators immerse themselves in these lived realities, they uncover needs and aspirations that standard market analyses overlook. An illustrative case is the development of solar-powered cold storage units, co-created with East African cooperatives. Engineers worked side by side with farmers, learning about local crop cycles, transportation bottlenecks, and communal decision-making processes. This collaborative design yielded units that run on both solar and grid electricity, feature modular components repairable with locally sourced parts, and accommodate communal ownership models that align with social norms. The result? A 40% reduction in post-harvest losses, increased household incomes, and a template for scaling to other regions. Crucially, Empathetic innovation anticipates unintended consequences through scenario workshops that role-play potential futures. In the cold storage example, participants simulated system failures during the rainy season, prompting engineers to incorporate waterproofing measures and emergency manual coolers. This anticipatory empathy, envisioning how innovations will function under real-world stresses, ensures that solutions are robust, culturally consonant, and ecologically sensitive. Empathetic innovation thus merges technical creativity with moral imagination. It insists that breakthroughs respect and reflect the communities they serve, and that success metrics extend beyond adoption rates to include social cohesion, environmental health, and dignity of users. By anchoring innovation in empathy, we uphold mutual responsibility and elevate coexistence from aspiration to action. Economic systems for mutual flourishing. Conventional economics often externalizes environmental costs, viewing nature as a free input rather than a living partner. To realign markets with the ethics of coexistence, we must adopt economic paradigms that internalize ecological and social impacts. Inclusive prosperity models, like Kate Raworth's Donut Economics, define prosperity as achieving social foundations without breaching planetary boundaries. Operationalizing this vision requires retooling fiscal instruments. Carbon taxes calibrated to ecosystem thresholds channel revenue into forest restoration and renewable energy grants. Water extraction fees fund watershed rehabilitation, while payments for ecosystem services, PES, remunerate indigenous guardians who maintain wildlife corridors. Ecuador's Yasuni ITT initiative, though imperfect, pioneered the concept of leaving oil underground in exchange for international financial commitments, a direct attempt to monetize ecological stewardship rather than extraction. Cooperative business structures further distribute economic benefits equitably, reinforcing the principle that prosperity must support community resilience. In the Mondragon Corporation model of worker cooperatives, profits are shared and strategic decisions are made democratically, highlighting how economic democracy can coexist with environmental responsibility. Financial markets, too, can pivot toward mutual flourishing. Green bonds tied to reforestation projects, social impact bonds funding urban greening, and biodiversity credits linked to verified species habitat improvements shift capital toward regenerative outcomes. Rigorous third-party verification and transparent reporting ensure that these instruments deliver genuine ecological gains rather than greenwashing. Ultimately, by embedding ethical coexistence into economic frameworks, through taxes, subsidies, cooperative governance, and impact investing, we align financial flows with the well-being of people and planet, fostering systems where mutual flourishing becomes the standard measure of success. Urban design as a living system. Cities, home to over half the world's population, can no longer be monocultures of concrete and steel. The imperative to coexist demands that urban design treat metropolitan areas as living systems, integrating ecological processes into their very fabric. Biophilic design principles, bringing natural elements into buildings and public spaces, improve air quality, reduce stress, and provide habitats for urban fauna. Transport networks must prioritize connectivity for non-human species as well as people. Wildlife overpasses and underpasses across highways have been shown to reduce animal vehicle collisions by up to 90%, while also preserving genetic flow among fragmented populations. In Singapore, green corridors link parks across the city, enabling butterflies, birds, and native plants to thrive amid dense development. Urban waterscapes offer another frontier for coexistence. Restored wetlands on city fringes act as natural water filters and flood buffers, while creating birdwatching and recreational opportunities. The Cheongyecheon stream restoration in Seoul transformed a concrete-covered waterway into a lush, riparian habitat, cooling the urban microclimate by several degrees and attracting over 100 species of wildlife. Local food systems reinforce ecological and social health. Community-supported agriculture, CSA programs, rooftop farms, and edible landscaping reduce food miles, enhance food security, and foster social cohesion. The Edible Schoolyard Project in Berkeley, California, integrates organic gardening and cooking into education, cultivating ecological literacy alongside nutritional well-being. By reimagining urban landscapes as dynamic, interdependent ecosystems, we create cities that nourish both human communities and the broader web of life, modeling coexistence at a scale that influences billions. The guardians of future generations. Our ethical duty reaches beyond the present moment, extending a moral imperative to beings yet unborn. The concept of intergenerational justice compels us to consider how current choices, land use, energy consumption, species introductions, shape the inheritance we pass on. To fulfill this responsibility, we must institutionalize mechanisms that represent future interests, generational trusts, climate litigation led by youth coalitions, and constitutional amendments granting rights to nature for the benefit of future stewards. In New Zealand, the Wanganui River has been granted legal personhood, with appointed guardians, one from the local Maori iwi and one from government, entrusted to act on its behalf and protect its well-being for generations to come. In the U.S., the Sunrise Movement mobilizes young people to demand climate policies that safeguard their future, demonstrating how guardianship can arise through civic engagement as well as legal innovation. Education plays a pivotal role. Curricula that blend systems thinking, environmental science, and ethical reasoning equip students with the knowledge and moral frameworks to navigate complex codependency challenges. Programs like the Green School in Bali immerse learners in ecological design, renewable energy, and permaculture, igniting lifelong commitments to stewardship. Technology, too, can support future guardianship. Blockchain-based land registries prevent illicit deforestation by ensuring transparent tracking of land use changes. Satellite monitoring enables early detection of illegal logging or pollution incidents. Paired with community enforcement networks, these tools extend our collective reach to protect ecosystems on behalf of those who will inhabit the planet centuries from now. By weaving intergenerational accountability into our legal, social, and technological infrastructures, we honor the living legacy of coexistence, ensuring that creativity, harmony, and ethics converge not only for ourselves, but for every life yet to come. Ethical consumption as daily practice. Every purchase reverberates through supply chains, ecosystems, and communities. Ethical consumption reframes buying decisions as acts of coexistence, urging us to consider the origins, labor conditions, and ecological footprints of the goods we embrace. Rather than mindless convenience, we adopt a conscious cart mentality, researching brands for fair wage certifications, regenerative agriculture practices, and circular design commitments. Consider the cacao trade. Conventional chocolate often relies on monoculture plantations that degrade soil and fuel deforestation, while small cooperatives in West Africa champion agroforestry, intercropping cocoa with native trees to enhance biodiversity. By prioritizing these ethically produced bars, even at a modest price premium, we channel market incentives toward land stewardship and human dignity. Ethical consumption also extends to services and experiences. Ecotourism operators, who employ local guides and invest in community infrastructure, preserve cultural and environmental heritage, transforming travelers into active allies of conservation. Similarly, digital subscriptions to platforms that allocate a portion of revenues to carbon offsets or habitat restoration invite subscribers to uphold coexistence through recurring micro-contributions. Ultimately, weaving ethical consumption into our routines honors the principle that coexistence is not abstract, but enacted daily. Each choice an affirmation of our interdependence and a creative leverage point for systemic change. The digital technologies aligned with coexistence. In the digital age, technology can either exacerbate ecological disruption or become a powerful tool for harmony. Ethical tech development integrates coexistence imperatives from inception. Conservation drones, for example, map poaching hotspots, allowing rangers to protect endangered species more effectively while minimizing intrusive monitoring. AI-driven algorithms optimize irrigation schedules to conserve water in drought-prone areas without compromising crop yields. Beyond hardware, blockchain innovations ensure traceability in supply chains, enabling consumers to verify that diamonds, timber, and seafood come from sustainably managed sources. Smart contracts can automatically trigger financial penalties for suppliers whose operations breach agreed-upon ecological standards, shifting accountability onto real-time data streams. Virtual reality and augmented reality offer immersive environmental education experiences that cultivate empathy and motivate action. By simulating coral bleaching scenarios or rainforest canopy exploration, these platforms transport users into non-human realms, fostering an emotional connection that transcends traditional media. Designing digital ecosystems for coexistence demands rigorous data ethics, transparent collection practices, respect for indigenous data sovereignty, and equitable access to technologies. By embedding ethical guidelines and iterative stakeholder feedback loops into software development life cycles, we co-create tools that honor all life forms and reinforce the responsibility to coexist. Legal frameworks and global cooperation. No single nation can steward a migratory whale or a carbon-laden atmosphere. Global challenges demand collective governance anchored in ethical coexistence. International treaties, such as the Convention on Biological Diversity, set aspirational targets for habitat protection and species recovery. Yet success hinges on robust enforcement mechanisms and equitable financing for developing nations. Innovative legal instruments bridge gaps. The Escazú Agreement in Latin America guarantees public access to environmental information and participation in decision-making, empowering communities to defend ecosystems. Transboundary conservation areas, like the Kavango-Zambezi landscape in southern Africa, unite 5 countries in joint management of elephant corridors and river basins, exemplifying cooperative sovereignty over shared natural heritage. Emerging concepts of ecocide law, criminalizing large-scale environmental destruction, seek to plug legal lacunae by holding corporate and state actors accountable. Draft protocols at the International Criminal Court level envision prosecuting severe ecological harm as a crime against humanity and nature, erecting a deterrent against reckless exploitation. Crafting these frameworks demands inclusive diplomacy, engaging indigenous knowledge holders, civil society, and private sector stakeholders to co-author treaties that reflect a spectrum of values. By enshrining coexistence ethics in binding international law, we signal a collective commitment to protect the living world across borders and generations. Spiritual and artistic dimensions of coexistence. Coexistence ethics resonates deeply in the realms of spirit and art, where narratives and rituals shape values and aspirations. Spiritual traditions, from animistic worldviews that recognize sentience in stones and streams, to major religions that espouse stewardship of creation, offer moral architectures that inspire reverence for all life. Integrating these perspectives into environmental discourse bridges empirical science with the intangible threads that bind human purpose to planetary well-being. Artists amplify coexistence imperatives through immersive installations that transform gallery spaces into living ecosystems. Moss walls that purify air, sonic sculptures echoing endangered bird calls, or community murals painted with soil pigments sourced from restored wetlands. Such works catalyze collective reflection, stirring audiences to feel kinship with non-human voices and to imagine a world where human creativity uplifts rather than erodes. Performance art and ritual ceremonies, like the Shipibo-Kanibo weaving of cosmological tapestries in the Amazon, embody the living relationship between culture and habitat, reminding observers that artistic expression and ecological integrity are inseparable. By fostering spaces where science, spirit, and art converge, we awaken holistic motivations for coexistence that transcend utilitarian incentives. Metrics, storytelling, and the living legacy. Sustaining an ethic of coexistence requires metrics that capture ecological health, social well-being, and cultural vitality. Composite indicators, blending biodiversity indices, community resilience scores, and measures of cultural practice continuity, paint a nuanced portrait of mutual flourishing. Open data dashboards co-created with local stakeholders democratize access, enabling communities to track progress and advocate for corrective actions. Yet data alone cannot galvanize action. Human brains are wired for narrative. Storytelling, through documentaries, podcasts, oral histories, and digital media, translates complex metrics into compelling journeys. When a community chronicles the revival of a depleted fishery through the eyes of elder fishers, scientific data on stock recovery come alive with emotion and context, inspiring other communities to adopt similar stewardship models. Living legacies take shape in shared archives, seed libraries, community-based wildlife monitoring logs, and collaborative art repositories that document the evolving tapestry of coexistence. These archives become both historical record and stimulus for fresh inquiries, inviting future generations to learn from past successes and missteps. By weaving metrics with storytelling, we forge a resilient ethic, one that honors the imperative of harmony, the imperative of creativity, and the imperative of ethics, ensuring that the responsibility of coexistence endures as a vibrant, evolving legacy for all life yet to come. Interspecies justice and rights of nature. Interspecies justice advances the radical notion that legal systems must recognize the intrinsic rights of non-human beings and ecosystems, not merely humans. The rights of nature movement, where rivers, forests, and wetlands gain legal personhood, recasts environmental harm as rights violations. Ecuador's 2008 constitution enshrined such rights, and New Zealand followed by granting the Wanganui River legal status, appointing guardians to represent its interests in court. Translating personhood into practice demands innovative legal mechanisms. Guardianship councils blend scientific expertise, traditional custodianship, and community input to interpret ecosystem rights. When industrial activities threaten a river's health, guardians can sue on its behalf, compelling remediation or halting destructive projects. This interspecies justice framework forces courts to weigh ecological flourishing alongside human development, requiring impact assessments to address both human welfare and the river's well-being. Beyond legal personhood, interspecies justice calls for universal moral consideration, the recognition that sentient animals, keystone species, and foundational microbial communities each harbor claims to non-interference and flourishing. Ethical guidelines for research, wildlife management, and habitat restoration must incorporate these claims, ensuring that decisions, from reintroducing apex predators to antibiotic use in agriculture, respect the rights and agency of non-human stakeholders. By embedding interspecies justice into jurisprudence and policy, societies transform coexistence from benevolent stewardship into binding reciprocity, honoring the living bonds that unite us with every other being. To the restoration economy and regenerative ventures. Moving from extractive models to a restoration economy reimagines capital flows as investments in planetary health. Regenerative ventures, businesses explicitly designed to heal rather than deplete ecosystems, span sectors from agriculture to construction. Carbon-sequestering agroforestry companies pay farmers to plant native trees. Mycelium-based packaging startups replace single-use plastics with biodegradable alternatives. And regenerative aquaculture cultivates shellfish beds that filter water and rebuild coastal habitats. Financing these initiatives requires creative instruments, blended capital funds, combine concessional grants with market-rate loans to de-risk early-stage restoration projects. Impact investors assess return not only in financial profit, but in metrics of biodiversity gain, soil carbon increase, and community livelihoods. Green banks, publicly capitalized institutions, offer low-interest loans for ecosystem-friendly infrastructure, catalyzing private co-financing. Large-scale restoration programs, such as the Bond Challenge's pledge to restore 350 million hectares of degraded land by 2030, demonstrate how ambition paired with local entrepreneurship can scale regenerative solutions. In India's Green Wall initiative, farmers receive payment for restoring their wastelands with native species, transforming former scrub into carbon sinks and wildlife corridors. The restoration economy thus reframes business as a driver of collective renewal, channeling human ingenuity and finance toward recreating the conditions for all life to flourish. Cultivating coexistence through education and story. Education systems play a pivotal role in instilling the values and competencies required for ethical coexistence. Curricula that integrate ecological literacy, moral philosophy, and systems thinking prepare learners to navigate complex socio-ecological challenges. Experiential programs, forest schools, community restoration apprenticeships, and citizen science platforms immerse students in hands-on stewardship, fostering personal bonds with local ecosystems. Storytelling elevates these lessons, embedding coexistence themes in narratives that resonate emotionally and culturally. Graphic novels that follow the interwoven journeys of human and animal protagonists, immersive theater productions staged in restored wetlands, and digital story maps co-created with indigenous elders weave factual learning into evocative mythscapes. These stories serve as cultural repositories, transmitting the ethos of mutual responsibility across generations and geographies. Higher education and professional training also adapt. Engineering students learn biomimetic design, inspired by termite mounds' passive cooling, while business schools offer social ecological systems labs, where future executives grapple with real-world trade-offs between profit and planetary integrity. By anchoring education in lived examples of coexistence, we cultivate a citizenry equipped not only with knowledge, but with the creative imagination to re-envision human roles on Earth. Ethical bioengineering and synthetic biology. The advent of synthetic biology, with its promise to engineer organisms for pollution cleanup, disease control, or resource production, poses profound ethical questions. Coexistence ethics demands that bioengineering ventures proceed with extreme caution, transparent oversight, and inclusive deliberation. Before releasing genetically modified organisms into the wild, scientists and stakeholders must model potential ecosystem interactions, horizontal gene transfer risks, and long-term stability. Frameworks like the precautionary principle guide these deliberations, insisting that benefits be demonstrably greater than risks and that reversible control measures exist. Public engagement processes, deliberative citizens' assemblies on gene drives for vector-borne disease eradication, for instance, ensure that affected communities co-author consent and governance protocols. Such participatory foresight balances human well-being against ecological integrity, honoring both the creative imperative to innovate and the ethical imperative to safeguard all life. At the same time, bio-inspired materials, such as self-healing polymers modeled after skin regeneration or photosynthetic biomaterials that capture carbon, illustrate synthetic biology's capacity to mimic nature's solutions. When developed responsibly, these advances reduce our footprint, repair damage, and open new pathways for harmonious coexistence between technology and biology. Integrative networks for planetary resilience. Coexistence on a planetary scale requires integrative networks that connect local initiatives into global mosaics of resilience. Digital platforms link community restoration groups across continents, enabling peer-to-peer knowledge exchange on native species propagation or wetland design. Intergovernmental alliances, such as the Global Biodiversity Framework under the Convention on Biological Diversity, coordinate national commitments, funding mechanisms, and best practice guidelines. At the grassroots, biocultural hubs emerge in cities and villages alike, places where activists, scientists, artists, and policymakers convene regularly to share data, craft policy prototypes, and launch cooperative ventures. These hubs foster cross-scale learning. Local successes inform regional strategies, national policies adapt to ground-level realities, and global networks amplify promising models. Blockchain-enabled registries track restoration credits, verified increases in biodiversity or carbon storage, creating a transparent ledger that underpins voluntary carbon markets, green investing, and public accountability. When paired with geospatial monitoring and community-based audits, these digital tools weave a real-time tapestry of planetary health, enabling course corrections and adaptive governance. Through such integrative networks, the imperatives of creativity, harmony, and ethics converge into a living architecture of coexistence, one that is dynamic, participatory, and attuned to the pulse of Earth itself. Transcultural dialogues for shared stewardship. The imperative of coexistence transcends borders and demands dialogue among diverse worldviews. Cultivating a global ethic requires platforms where indigenous philosophies, rooted in notions of kinship with land, and urban technocratic perspectives engage in genuine exchange. Such dialogues surface complementary insights. Indigenous protocols for harvesting spiritual medicines inform sustainable bioprospecting regulations, while satellite mapping techniques strengthen community land claim evidence. Transcultural forums can take many forms. Annual Earth symposia that rotate among regions, convening tribal leaders, policymakers, scientists, and youth delegates. Online interfaith councils that explore the spiritual dimensions of ecological protection, and polyvocal art collaborations where participants from different traditions co-create multimedia installations celebrating biocultural diversity. These encounters foster mutual learning and co-ownership of solutions, ensuring that climate adaptation, conservation planning, and resource management respect ancestral rights, cultural identities, and scientific rigor alike. By weaving together threads of cosmology, environmental science, and community practice, transcultural dialogues produce hybrid governance models, co-designed conservation easements, shared guardianship councils, and community-led ecological monitoring networks. In these hybrid spaces, the imperative of empathy meets the necessity of creativity, forging pathways for humanity to honor all its cultural expressions while safeguarding the living world. Immersive art science residencies in the wild. Breakthroughs in coexistence often spark where art and science intersect in immersive natural settings. Residencies that embed artists, ecologists, technologists, and community members into forest canopies, desert oases, or coral atolls yield generative collaborations. A sculptor might prototype biodegradable reef structures with marine biologists. A data poet could translate soil microbiome sequences into sonic installations heard by passing migratory birds. One such program, Symbiosis Labs, places participants in remote ecosystems for months at a time, providing workshops in bioacoustics, permaculture design, and digital storytelling. Residents co-author projects, mapping insect flight patterns with drone-mounted microphones, creating living murals of moss that visualize air pollution trends. These endeavors not only produce novel insights, but forge deep emotional bonds between creators and the environments they inhabit. Upon returning to urban centers, alumni networks sustain momentum through pop-up exhibitions, open-source toolkits, and co-authored publications. Their work reinvigorates public discourse, demonstrating that empathetic, multisensory engagement with nature inspires policymakers and the general public to reimagine cities, industries, and education as extensions of living systems. By situating creativity at the confluence of art, science, and community in situ, immersive residencies embody the ethos that coexistence thrives on: embodied curiosity and collaborative invention. The philanthropy reimagined, investing in ecological futures. Philanthropy has long played a role in conservation, but to align with a responsibility of coexistence, donors must transcend grant-making as charity. Instead, they act as strategic investors in ecological futures, deploying catalytic capital to pilot regenerative enterprises and community-led restoration. Endowments under this model function like venture funds for planetary health, offering convertible grants, revenue-sharing agreements, and patient capital structured around impact milestones, regrowth of native forests, recovery of freshwater mussel populations, or revitalization of traditional seed varieties. Impact evaluation evolves accordingly. Rather than counting acres protected, funders track system-level health indicators, groundwater recharge rates, pollinator diversity indices, and cultural well-being metrics such as language revitalization tied to land restoration. Real-time dashboards, co-developed with grantees, display progress and adapt funding tranches based on ecological feedback. Collaborative philanthropic consortia, uniting family foundations, corporate giving programs, and government match funds, leverage pooled resources to underwrite large-scale initiatives such as rewilding mountain ranges or financing community solar microgrids in off-grid villages. Shared governance structures ensure that local stakeholders set priorities and manage funds, upholding the principle that those most intimately connected to the land lead its regeneration. In this reimagined philanthropic ecosystem, generosity becomes an act of solidarity with all life forms, a creative, strategic commitment that cultivates long-term resilience and flourishing across biomes and cultures. Living policies, dynamic frameworks for adaptive governance. Static regulations cannot keep pace with shifting baselines wrought by climate change and biodiversity loss. Living policies, governance instruments designed to evolve, embody the ethic of reciprocal accountability. These frameworks incorporate automatic triggers for review, species recovery targets that, when unmet, mandate policy revisions, real-time pollution sensors that adjust industrial discharge permits, and mobile app-enabled community reporting that flags emerging invasive species. One pioneering example is the Dynamic Fisheries Accord, in which catch quotas adjust daily based on vessel tracking data and fish population surveys. When biomass dips below safe thresholds, the system automatically reduces allowable catch, notifying fishers via SMS and redirecting them to alternative livelihoods supported by transition funds. This blend of technology, policy, and social support demonstrates how living regulations sustain both ecological and human welfare. Key to living policies is participatory co-creation. Policy labs involving government agencies, local resource users, scientists, and civil society continually iterate on rule sets, piloting micro-policies, analyzing outcomes, and scaling successes. By embedding feedback loops at every level, governance becomes a shared practice of experimentation and refinement rather than a fixed decree. Through these dynamic, adaptive frameworks, societies honor the imperative of ethics and coexistence, ensuring our collective rules grow in harmony with the very systems they aim to govern. Vision for a global stewards network. Imagine a planetary network of living labs, thousands of node communities where innovation, policy, and storytelling converge to steward local ecosystems. Each lab integrates a core trio of functions: ecological monitoring, from drones to microbial assays, cultural exchange, ranging from oral history recordings to arts residencies, and policy prototyping, including living regulations and seed funding for regenerative ventures. These labs interconnect through a digital backbone, an open-source platform that aggregates data, maps progress, and facilitates peer-to-peer mentoring. A rewilding pilot in the Amazon shares methodologies with a mangrove restoration project in Bangladesh. A circular economy school in Helsinki exchanges curricula with a zero-waste cooperative in Nairobi. Virtual conferences, cross-site fellowships, and hackathons spark cross-pollination, accelerating the diffusion of successful models. At the network's heart lies a shared charter of coexistence, affirming the imperatives of creativity, harmony, and ethics. Signatories, ranging from village councils to multinational corporations, pledge to implement living policies, support intercultural dialogues, and allocate resources toward mutual flourishing. An annual Global Stewards Summit rotates among lab sites, co-hosted by local communities and international bodies, celebrating achievements and charting collective priorities. This vision, of a decentralized yet interconnected web of stewardship, embodies the chapter's core message. The responsibility of coexistence flourishes when creativity activates ethics in concrete, collaborative systems. By weaving individual actions into a planetary tapestry of care, we ensure that the stewardship of Earth's living heritage becomes a vibrant, shared legacy for all time. Deep time ethics and geological stewardship. To truly honor coexistence, we must adopt a deep time perspective, extending our moral horizon to encompass past and future epochs. Earth's geological record, layers of sediment, fossilized forests, ancient reefs, testifies to the long cycles through which life has emerged, evolved, and adapted. Deep time ethics recognizes that our actions today will echo through millennia, altering strata that future beings, human or otherwise, will inherit. Practically, this means reimagining infrastructure projects not as ephemeral constructions, but as geological events. Urban planners factor in seismic resilience alongside carbon budgets. Architects source locally historic stone, whose quarry scars will be read by distant descendants. Policymakers weigh nuclear waste storage against 10,000-year safety thresholds rather than electoral cycles. Museums and planetariums partner with indigenous knowledge keepers to create deep-time dialogues, immersive exhibits that juxtapose human histories with tectonic and climatic upheavals over eons. Visitors leave with a visceral sense of humility and responsibility, understanding, for example, that our carbon emissions today will be recorded as an anomalous Anthropocene layer. By embedding deep-time ethics into education, design, and governance, we cultivate geological stewardship, ensuring that the legacy of our coexistence with all life forms honors Earth's ancient rhythms and preserves its capacity for renewal across the ages. Urban ecology's next frontier, multi-species cities. The concept of the city as a human habitat is evolving into the vision of multi-species metropolises where architectural design accommodates avian nesting, pollinator pathways, and small mammal corridors. Engineers are prototyping fauna passages on footbridges, allowing bats and nocturnal insects safe transit over highways. High-rise buildings integrate bird-safe glass patterns and ledges for raptor nesting, while ground-level greenbelts are seeded exclusively with nectar-rich native flora, attracting hummingbirds and butterflies. In a pilot project in Rotterdam, Phenomena Towers feature facade-mounted beehives, monitored by sensors that adjust hive humidity and temperature. The honey-produced funds community gardens, while the increased pollinator presence boosts urban orchard yields. Meanwhile, São Paulo's Sky Lakes program transforms corporate rooftops into ephemeral wetland microhabitats, fostering dragonfly breeding grounds and supporting migratory shorebirds. These multi-species urban experiments demand novel metrics, species inclusion indexes, that quantify habitat connectivity, breeding success rates, and cross-species interaction frequencies. Urban ecology labs engage citizen scientists in nocturnal wildlife surveys using smartphone apps that record soundscapes and movement, integrating human curiosity with technological rigor. By reconceiving cities as dynamic ecosystems, we amplify coexistence's creativity imperative, crafting urban futures where human ingenuity and non-human life forms interlace in vibrant, resilient networks. Psychological alchemy, transforming ecological grief. As environmental crises intensify, many experience ecological grief, mourning species extinction, landscape degradation, or climate disasters. Ethical coexistence requires addressing these psychological dimensions, transforming grief into constructive engagement rather than despair. Eco-psychology practitioners facilitate barefoot grief circles in restored woodlands, where participants share their losses, scorched forests, vanished wetlands, and find solace in communal ritual and nature immersion. These circles blend neuroscience findings on group therapy with indigenous mourning practices, creating a hybrid modality that replenishes hope and fosters environmental action. Digital platforms offer grief-to-action pathways. After an online climate sorrow assessment, users receive personalized suggestions, joining local seed-saving networks, volunteering in reforestation drives, or contributing to citizen science biodiversity monitoring. By channeling grief into embodied practices of restoration and advocacy, individuals reclaim agency and reinforce the ethic that sadness for loss galvanizes deeper commitment to coexistence. Integrating psychological support into conservation organizations and policy frameworks acknowledges that mental well-being and ecological health are inseparable. In this alchemy of grief, emotional healing and ecosystem regeneration become tandem expressions of our collective responsibility. Financial innovations for biodiverse finance. Mainstream finance often sidelines biodiversity considerations, but ethical coexistence demands that capital markets evolve to value life's complexity. Nature performance bonds emerge as a novel instrument. Issuers pledge to restore designated habitats, and bond coupons increase with measurable biodiversity gains. Investors thus earn returns only when ecological conditions improve, aligning profit motives with species recovery. Complementing these are biocredit platforms, where landowners tokenize ecosystem services, carbon sequestration, water purification, seed bank preservation, and trade them transparently on blockchain exchanges. Smart contracts automate verification. Satellite imagery triggers escrow releases when canopy cover thresholds are met. Acoustic sensors log bird song diversity to validate credits for avian habitat conservation. Impact fund managers create mixed asset portfolios that blend traditional equities with shares in community-led regenerative agriculture, marine protected area co-ops, and forest stewardship enterprises. Comprehensive reporting standards, like the forthcoming Global Biodiversity Framework for Financial Disclosures, require firms to disclose dependencies and impacts on at-risk species and ecosystems. These financial innovations harness creativity and ethics, rechanneling global capital flows toward projects that ensure mutual flourishing. They transform abstract ecological values into concrete market signals, reinforcing our shared duty to sustain the diversity of life. They're the global tapestry of coexistence, a call to collective action. As we conclude this chapter, we envision Earth as a vibrant tapestry woven from the countless acts of stewardship, innovation, empathy, and justice practiced daily by individuals, communities, and nations. Each thread, whether a community-led rewilding project in Mongolia, a solar microgrid powering a remote village in Uzbekistan, or an indigenous-led coral restoration in Micronesia, contributes to a living mosaic of coexistence. Global solidarity networks knit these threads into robust frameworks, transdisciplinary research consortia, multilateral environmental courts, and dynamic commons institutions empowered by digital governance tools. The Charter of Coexistence, adopted by universities, municipalities, and intergovernmental bodies, inspires synchronized actions, annual planetary service days, climate resilience hackathons, and ecosystem restitution pledges. Yet this tapestry remains ever unfinished, inviting each reader to add their own strand. Whether through policy innovation, creative design, ethical finance, or heartfelt empathy, we all possess the agency and imagination to shape the emerging contours of coexistence. In embracing our collective responsibility, we fulfill the imperatives of creativity, crafting novel solutions, harmony, aligning with life's intricate patterns, and ethics, acting with compassion and justice. Together, we herald a future where all forms of life thrive in reciprocal abundance, weaving an enduring legacy for generations yet unborn. Symbiotic enterprises, business models in mutual aid. Emerging enterprises are reframing business not as extraction machines, but as symbiotic systems. Social enterprises in Latin America, for instance, operate food forests that interplant diverse fruit, nut, and medicinal species, yielding harvests for communities, wildlife habitat, carbon sequestration, and cultural revival. Local cooperatives share profits equitably, reinforce traditional agricultural knowledge, and reinvest surplus into watershed restoration. In the tech sector, platform cooperatives offer digital services, ride-sharing, home rentals, knowledge exchange, owned and governed by workers and users. By eliminating the extractive intermediaries of venture capital-backed gig platforms, they prioritize fair wages, ecological impact metrics, and reinvestment in community projects such as urban green spaces and tool libraries. This model illustrates how digital innovation can embody coexistence ethics, distributing value widely rather than concentrating it. Even luxury brands, once symbols of conspicuous consumption, are pivoting toward regenerative sourcing. A Swiss watchmaker commissions artisans in the Amazon to weave leather alternatives from sustainable palm fiber, funding reforestation and indigenous language revitalization. Purchases become partnerships. Each watch carries a unique QR code, linking buyers to videos tracing the fiber's cultivation and stories of local rangers protecting forest corridors. These symbiotic enterprises demonstrate that profit motives and planetary stewardship need not be antagonistic. Through creative financial structures, revenue-sharing contracts, community equity shares, and impact-based dividends, they weave economic activity into the fabric of mutual aid, ensuring that commerce strengthens rather than undermines the living world. The Festival of Global Biocultural Diversity. Imagine a biennial festival of global biocultural diversity, an ever-shifting celebration rotating among continents, where communities gather to share songs sung for pollinators, dances honoring ancestral harvests, and recipes rooted in local agroforestry. The festival's core program includes living libraries, open-air archives where elders demonstrate seed saving, storytellers recount origin myths of rivers and mountains, and VR installations let visitors experience deep-sea ecosystems or highland cloud forests. Hack and Plant Labs, collaborative workspaces where participants co-design regenerative prototypes, microbial soil enhancers, solar-powered irrigation drones, or bioacoustic monitoring devices, guided by multidisciplinary mentors. Summit of Sentience, a colloquium where ethicists, indigenous custodians, neuroscientists, and animal behaviorists debate emerging frameworks for interspecies justice, culminating in a living declaration drafted by youth delegates. Marketplace of Mutual Flourishing, a cooperative bazaar featuring crafts made from upcycled materials, regenerative farm goods, community-owned solar products, and impact investable projects, linking cultural heritage with ethical commerce. The festival's ripples extend year-round through digital storytelling platforms, decentralized bioregional hubs, and traveling exhibitions. By animating the imperatives of creativity, harmony, and ethics in a vivid multisensory tapestry, it fosters a global ethos of responsibility, reminding us that celebrating Earth's diversity is itself an act of coexistence. Reflections. Thus far, we have constructed a rich and creative blueprint for the responsibility of coexistence, showing how ethical duty extends far beyond human-centered concerns to encompass every living being and ecosystem on Earth. We first reframed our moral vision. Moving from domination to kinship, we embraced an interconnected ethic that recognizes rivers, forests, animals, and microbes as partners in a shared journey. We then grounded this ethic in practice, designing legal personhood for ecosystems, embedding reciprocal accountability through adaptive policies, and honoring ancestral land care rituals alongside cutting-edge ecological monitoring. We explored how empathy must bridge species boundaries, deepening our understanding of animal sentience and microbial agency, and learned to channel that empathy into tangible innovations, community co-designed technologies, regenerative enterprises, and financial instruments that tie profit to planetary health. Our cities, too, were reimagined as living systems, multi-species habitats woven with pollinator corridors, green roofs, and wildlife passages, while daily choices from ethical consumption to digital stewardship became acts of mutual flourishing. Moving from local to global scales, we charted frameworks for cross-boundary stewardship of rainforests, mountain ranges, and coral seas, and envisioned immersive art-science residencies and transcultural dialogues that co-create knowledge across worldviews. We established living policies that self-correct through environmental feedback, launched networks of living labs for collective innovation, and proposed rites and festivals that ritualize restoration, transforming grief into constructive action. At every turn, we honored the three imperatives: creativity in designing symbiotic enterprises, financial tools, and multi-species cities, harmony by realigning human rhythms with seasonal, geological, and microbial cycles, and ethics by extending justice across species, generations, and cultures. In sum, Chapter 4 equips us with a holistic, actionable framework, one that blends tradition and technology, science and spirit, policy and practice, to ensure that our shared responsibility leads to a world where all forms of life thrive in reciprocal abundance.